Men, there's something you need to understand clearly before we go any further. Ego doesn't collapse because of insults, arguments, or aggression. Ego collapses when it stops being fed. In modern dating, many women don't lose interest because a man mistreats them. They lose emotional balance when a man quietly removes validation, attention, and emotional leverage. That's the part most men never grasp. Too many men think power comes from confrontation. It doesn't. Confrontation gives emotional engagement, and engagement feeds ego. Silence, composure, and indifference do far more damage to ego than any harsh words ever could. When you stop reacting, stop chasing, and stop seeking approval, something shifts internally for her. The identity she built around being wanted, prioritized, or admired starts to shake. This isn't about cruelty, it's about psychology. Ego forms when attention is consistent and unearned. It grows when validation flows freely without accountability. When that stream dries up, discomfort appears. Questions surface, confidence wobbles. And suddenly, the same woman who felt untouchable starts reacting emotionally. Men lose leverage when they overinvest, over-explain, and over-pursue. Women gain ego when they feel certain they can pull a man back at any time. The moment that certainty disappears, ego is forced to confront reality. This video breaks down how and why a woman's ego collapses when a man shifts his behavior, not aggressively, not dramatically, but decisively. You'll understand the exact triggers, the reactions, and the mistakes men make that accidentally rebuild the very ego they tried to escape. What you'll hear next isn't manipulation. It's awareness. And awareness changes everything. 1. Silence speaks volumes. The first and most powerful tool in influencing a woman's ego is silence. Men often underestimate the impact of simply withdrawing words, reactions, and constant engagement. Women are highly attuned to attention patterns, and when the flow of validation stops, their psychological framework shifts almost instantly. Silence isn't about being rude. It's about removing the emotional fuel that maintains her inflated self-perception. Think about it. When a man consistently chases, compliments, or over-engages, he creates predictability. That predictability becomes a foundation for ego. She begins to assume your availability, your admiration, and your approval are constants. The moment that changes, when you stop texting first, stop over-explaining yourself, or stop reacting to every story she shares, her mind notices. The ego built on certainty starts to question itself. Silence triggers a natural psychological response, reflection. Suddenly, she wonders why you're not chasing, why you're not reacting emotionally, and what changed. Questions surface. Did I overstep? Did I take him for granted? Does he not care anymore? This isn't manipulation. It's natural human reaction. Without your constant validation, her sense of self-worth must recalibrate. Another layer is that silence creates curiosity. When a man stops feeding attention, women often begin to notice his absence more than his presence. She may scroll through your social media to check what you're doing, analyze your recent behavior, or even bring up shared experiences to see if you respond differently. Her ego, which previously thrived on guaranteed engagement, now experiences a subtle tension. It needs proof of value, but it's not being fed it. Many men make the mistake of breaking silence too quickly. A single text, reaction, or attempt to re-engage prematurely can reset the pattern. Silence only works when it is consistent and intentional. It doesn't require explanation, confrontation, or apology. The moment you break it unnecessarily, her ego regains its prior structure and the effect is lost. The power of silence is amplified by emotional composure. If you withdraw attention but react emotionally when she tests you, through messages, teasing, or hints of drama, her ego doesn't collapse. Instead, It adapts to the attention being selectively available. True impact comes when your silence is paired with calm observation. You remain present in life, but detached from the compulsion to over-engage. In short, silence is far more effective than words or arguments. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't insult, and it doesn't humiliate. Instead, it forces a woman's ego to confront uncertainty, which naturally triggers introspection, reflection, and, even subtly, a shift in emotional hierarchy. Master silence, and you master the most underestimated psychological lever in modern dating. 2. Stop over-validating. One of the easiest ways a woman's ego grows is through constant validation. Compliments, reassurance, excessive attention. These are the fuel for self-perception. When a man over-validates, he unknowingly reinforces her sense of entitlement and control. The moment you stop, the ego that relied on this constant reinforcement begins to falter. Validation isn't inherently bad. Everyone wants to feel appreciated, admired, and respected. The issue arises when it's given excessively or without conditions. Many men think praising every detail, agreeing with every statement, or reacting to every story demonstrates interest. In reality, it creates dependency. She comes to expect it as normal. When it suddenly disappears, her internal narrative, "I am important, admired, and in control," begins to wobble. When you stop over-validating, her reactions vary. Some women may try harder to earn attention, increasing flirtation, sharing accomplishments, or subtly seeking recognition. Others may test your boundaries with disagreements or provocative behavior to see if you'll engage emotionally. Both responses reveal how much her ego relied on your constant approval. The key here is restraint. Validation should be intentional, earned, and impactful, not automatic. Complimenting or agreeing selectively communicates discernment and high standards. Women notice when attention is no longer freely given. That absence creates curiosity, uncertainty, and introspection, all forces that naturally deflate inflated self-perception. Men often make the mistake of over-explaining their withdrawal. Stopping validation works silently. There is no need to justify distance, reduce engagement, or rationalize your decisions. Her ego will adjust on its own once she experiences the absence of constant affirmation. This is far more effective than confrontation, criticism, or dramatic gestures. Another aspect is emotional neutrality. Even when she seeks recognition or tests you, remain composed. Responding impulsively, praising excessively, or attempting to fix her insecurity reverses the effect. Instead, your calm detachment signals that your attention is valuable and conditional, forcing her ego to recalibrate and acknowledge that she doesn't automatically control your emotional responses. In modern dating, this principle is crucial. Women are highly sensitive to shifts in attention and validation. Men who master selective engagement maintain control of their value while subtly influencing her perception. The result isn't humiliation or conflict. It's a natural psychological correction of ego inflated by habitual attention. By stopping over-validation, you allow attraction to be measured, self-awareness to emerge, and respect to be rebuilt. The ego that once relied on endless affirmation now has to reflect, adapt, and recognize your independence. That shift is far more effective than confrontation or harsh criticism. It's clean, subtle, and brutally effective. 3. Reduce availability. Another major factor that quietly impacts a woman's ego is availability. Most men make the mistake of being too present, too responsive, and too accommodating. They answer every text, attend every invitation, and bend schedules to suit her. While this feels like effort or investment, in reality, it feeds her sense of entitlement and reinforces the idea that your attention is guaranteed. When you reduce availability, her ego begins to experience friction. Reducing availability doesn't mean ignoring or being disrespectful. It means creating space for your life, priorities, and ambitions without constant accommodation. When a woman notices that your time is no longer freely available, her internal hierarchy starts to shift. Suddenly, she can't automatically assume access to your energy, presence, or validation. That tension naturally challenges the inflated self-perception built on automatic attention. The psychological principle here is scarcity. Humans value what isn't guaranteed. When you're always available, your value decreases in her eyes because predictability undermines intrigue. When you become selective about your presence, whether in conversations, meetings, or emotional engagement, she begins to notice and reassess her behavior. Attention that was once effortless now requires consideration, which subtly tests her ego and sense of control. Reducing availability also exposes how much she relies on your engagement for emotional fuel. Women who previously assumed you would always respond begin to feel subtle discomfort when you step back. She may test your boundaries, try to regain attention, or analyze your behavior. These reactions reveal her priorities, whether she values you genuinely or primarily enjoys the validation you provide. Men often make the mistake of over-explaining absence. Saying things like "I've been busy" repeatedly or over-justifying distance negates the psychological impact of reduced availability. True power comes from intentional detachment coupled with consistency. Your presence is valuable because it is not automatic, and your absence carries weight precisely because it is measured. The most effective approach is balance. Be present, but on your terms. Allow her to earn your attention through engagement, effort, or respect for your boundaries. When she realizes that your time is not a given, her ego naturally recalibrates. It's forced to operate within limits she previously ignored. Reducing availability isn't manipulation. It's a demonstration of independence and self-respect. By strategically controlling access to your attention and energy, you shift the dynamic. Her perception of your value increases, and her inflated ego starts to adjust to the reality that she cannot control you automatically. 4. Stop chasing. One of the fastest ways to subtly deflate a woman's ego is to stop chasing. Many men mistakenly equate effort with success, believing that persistence and constant pursuit demonstrate interest. In reality, relentless chasing inflates her ego and reinforces the belief that she controls the emotional dynamic. When you stop chasing, the dynamic flips, and her sense of automatic influence begins to crumble. Chasing often looks like excessive texting, calling first, over-investing in her plans, or constantly seeking approval. While it may feel like demonstrating commitment, it actually signals neediness. Women subconsciously pick up on over-eagerness and interpret it as low value. By ceasing the chase, you create space for reflection. She begins to question her behavior, priorities, and the assumptions she made about your availability. That uncertainty gently nudges her ego downward. The psychological mechanism here is rooted in scarcity and perceived value. A man who constantly pursues signals that his time, energy, and attention are limitless. A man who disengages communicates independence, self-respect, and high value. When she senses that she can no longer manipulate or predict your responses, her ego starts to adjust. She may initially attempt to test boundaries, flirt, or provoke reactions, but the underlying message is that control is no longer automatic. Stopping the chase doesn't mean being unkind, distant, or disrespectful. It's about maintaining composure, prioritizing your own life, and allowing interactions to be reciprocal rather than one-sided. Your withdrawal of pursuit forces her to evaluate her own behavior. Women who are genuinely invested will respond with interest, thoughtfulness, or engagement that reflects authentic attraction. Those who are primarily drawn to attention will struggle, sometimes acting dramatically or seeking validation elsewhere. Another critical point is consistency. Men who stop chasing but intermittently resume in response to emotional triggers undo the psychological effect. True impact comes when you remain steady, detached yet composed, confident yet unreactive. Your independence becomes a mirror. She sees herself not as the center of your world, but as a participant whose influence must be earned. Stopping the chase shifts the power dynamic without confrontation or insult. Her ego, previously inflated by guaranteed pursuit, now faces uncertainty. That uncertainty generates curiosity, self-reflection, and sometimes desire, but only if you maintain control of your own attention and avoid giving it freely again too soon. In short, ceasing the chase is one of the most effective ways to adjust a woman's ego naturally. It's clean, psychological, and grounded in human behavior. Attraction thrives when independence is maintained and attention is earned. And a man who masters this principle positions himself as confident, high value, and respected in modern dating. 5. Don't react emotionally. Another crucial element in subtly affecting a woman's ego is maintaining emotional neutrality. Men often make the mistake of reacting impulsively when a woman tests their boundaries, seeks attention, or behaves provocatively. Every emotional reaction, anger, frustration, jealousy, or overexcitement, feeds her ego because it signals that she still has influence over your emotional state. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, her perception of control begins to shift. Emotional reactions are powerful fuel for ego. If a woman sends provocative messages, tests your patience, or subtly challenges your boundaries, responding with immediate emotion reinforces her sense of influence. She sees that her behavior can dictate your feelings and actions. When you remain calm, composed, and measured, you remove that fuel. Her mind notices that your reactions are no longer guaranteed, forcing her to recalibrate how much influence she truly has. Neutrality doesn't mean coldness or hostility. It means observing without immediate judgment, maintaining confidence, and choosing responses selectively. For example, if she sends a flirtatious or manipulative message, a neutral, measured reply, or no reply at all, signals emotional independence. You are no longer reacting automatically, and that absence of control subtly challenges her ego. Another key aspect is consistency. Women quickly detect inconsistency. If you remain neutral sometimes but react emotionally at other times, it sends mixed signals and undermines the effect. Emotional neutrality works because it establishes predictable composure on your part while leaving her behavior as the variable. She begins to see that her previous strategies, provoking, testing, or fishing for reactions, no longer guarantee influence over you. Psychologically, this stage taps into self-reflection. When a woman sees that her behavior no longer produces emotional responses, she is forced to reconsider assumptions about the relationship dynamic and her role in it. Her ego, which thrived on eliciting responses, experiences subtle tension. That tension encourages introspection, which often leads to increased respect, curiosity, or even genuine attraction, but only if handled correctly. Finally, emotional neutrality reinforces boundaries. Women respect men who manage themselves regardless of provocation. By controlling your reactions, you maintain authority over your own emotional state. You also communicate that your value is intrinsic, not dependent on her approval or attention. In short, don't react emotionally. Observe, respond selectively, and remain composed. When a woman realizes that she can no longer manipulate your emotions through previous patterns, her ego naturally deflates, curiosity increases, and respect is rebuilt. Emotional neutrality is one of the cleanest, most powerful tools a man can use in modern dating psychology. 6. Limit praise and compliments. Praise and compliments are subtle fuels for a woman's ego. Men often assume that complimenting everything she does or saying positive things constantly strengthens attraction. In reality, overpraising has the opposite effect. It inflates her ego and creates dependency on your approval. Once you begin limiting praise and compliments, her self-perception begins to adjust, and her inflated sense of influence naturally softens. Limiting compliments doesn't mean being cold, critical, or disrespectful. It's about selectively engaging. For example, instead of commenting on every detail of her appearance or effort, you focus your attention on meaningful achievements or moments that truly stand out. When compliments are sparse, they carry weight, and she begins to notice that your attention and approval are not automatic. This scarcity triggers reflection. Why is he different? Why isn't he reacting like before? The uncertainty challenges her ego and subtly recalibrates her perception of value. Another common mistake men make is over-explaining compliments or pairing them with excessive validation. Statements like, "You look good, but I guess anyone would look fine in that dress," or "I'm impressed, but," negate the psychological impact of the praise and signal insecurity. Limiting praise works because it preserves your authority and ensures that any positive feedback communicates genuine recognition rather than habitual approval. Psychologically, women are wired to notice patterns of attention. When a man shifts from overpraising to selective acknowledgement, it disrupts the assumed pattern. That disruption sparks curiosity and self-assessment. She begins to evaluate her behavior, her value in your eyes, and whether she has relied too heavily on automatic validation. Her ego, once fed consistently, now experiences subtle tension, enough to encourage reflection and recalibration without confrontation or overt conflict. Limiting praise also enhances intrigue. When women notice that their actions don't automatically trigger attention, they become more observant and invested in earning recognition. This is a natural shift in psychological hierarchy. Previously, she was in control of eliciting emotional responses. Now, she sees that influence is not guaranteed. Her respect, appreciation, and desire often increase in response to this measured scarcity. Consistency is critical. Any return to overpraising undermines the effect and resets the dynamic. Praise, when given, should be deliberate, rare, and impactful. Emotional neutrality, combined with selective acknowledgement, is one of the most effective ways to influence her ego without manipulation or cruelty. In short, limiting praise and compliments is not about being unkind. It's about creating value and establishing boundaries. By strategically controlling when and how you provide recognition, you subtly challenge her inflated sense of self, encourage introspection, and rebuild attraction based on respect and earned attention rather than habitual approval. 7. Maintain independence. The final and arguably most powerful element in influencing a woman's ego is maintaining your independence. Ego inflates when it perceives that it controls another person's attention, energy, or emotional state. Men who are constantly available, reactive, or dependent on a woman's approval give her an unearned sense of influence. Maintaining independence, on the other hand, subtly removes that sense of control and forces her ego to recalibrate. Independence begins with your priorities. Focus on your career, personal goals, hobbies, and social life. Show that your time, energy, and attention are valuable resources that are not freely or automatically given. When a woman notices that your life is full and that her access to you is not guaranteed, it creates subtle tension. The ego, once inflated by certainty and control, now faces scarcity, a psychological trigger that promotes reflection and often desire. Another aspect of independence is emotional self-reliance. Do not allow her behavior, mood, or attempts to provoke reactions to dictate your emotional state. If she flirts, teases, or even manipulates subtly, respond with measured composure rather than giving in to impulses. This emotional autonomy communicates strength, confidence, and high value. The moment you react out of need or attachment, her sense of influence returns, and the psychological effect is lost. Physical and social independence also plays a key role. Maintaining friendships, social activities, and a life outside the relationship signals that your attention cannot be monopolized. Women naturally notice when a man is balanced, self-sufficient, and engaged with the world on his terms. This scarcity of access forces introspection. She begins to evaluate her behavior and the assumptions she made about controlling your attention. Consistency is critical. Independence is not about sporadic withdrawal or unpredictable behavior. It is about a steady presence in your own life while remaining selective in how you engage. Sporadic independence confuses, but consistent independence recalibrates ego. It demonstrates that attraction and respect must be earned and cannot be assumed. Psychologically, maintaining independence addresses the core of ego, reliance on external validation. By being self-sufficient, composed, and consistently engaged in your own life, you remove the automatic reinforcement her ego depended on. She is forced to confront reality, reflect on her actions, and reassess her emotional investment. Ultimately, independence is the foundation that reinforces all the other tactics. Silence, reduced validation, limited praise, emotional neutrality, and restrained availability. It ensures that your value is perceived correctly, that attraction is genuine, and that her ego adjusts naturally without manipulation or confrontation. A man who maintains independence commands respect, curiosity, and emotional balance in modern dating. Men, understanding female psychology is not about cruelty. It's about awareness, boundaries, and influence. A woman's ego thrives on attention, validation, and emotional predictability. When these elements are removed or adjusted strategically, her inflated sense of self naturally recalibrates. The tactics we've discussed — silence, reduced validation, limited praise, emotional neutrality, stopping the chase, reducing availability, and maintaining independence — work together to create a subtle but powerful shift in the dynamic. These techniques are not about manipulation or humiliation. They are about protecting your value, setting boundaries, and observing how a woman responds when she cannot control your attention or emotions automatically. Each step challenges assumptions that previously reinforced her ego: constant availability, unearned validation, and the certainty of emotional reactions. When those assumptions are disrupted, introspection occurs. Curiosity, respect, and authentic attraction naturally follow. The key principle underlying all of this is self-sufficiency. A man who maintains independence, composure, and consistent boundaries communicates intrinsic value. His attention is earned, not given freely, and his emotional state is not dictated by anyone else. Women naturally respond to strength, consistency, and self-respect. The moment a man embodies these qualities, the psychological hierarchy shifts. Her ego adjusts, not because she is punished, but because the system of reinforcement she relied on no longer exists. In modern dating, this knowledge is a powerful tool. It allows men to navigate relationships with clarity and confidence, ensuring that attraction is mutual, respect is earned, and emotional dynamics remain balanced. By understanding how ego is formed, maintained, and subtly deflated, men gain insight into behavior, reactions, and priorities, without resorting to conflict or aggression. In short, influencing a woman's ego effectively is about restraint, observation, and independence. The man who masters these principles does not chase, does not over-validate, and does not allow his emotions to be manipulated. Instead, he maintains value, attracts respect, and positions himself as a confident, self-sufficient individual in the modern dating world. Master this, and the dynamic changes permanently, silently, subtly, and decisively.